Welcome to I Just Don't Know, a podcast where we learn something new, challenge opinions, and hope to make the misinformed informed. I can openly say I've spoken when I did not need to, been unnecessarily controversial, and shared my misinformed opinion, thinking it was not. In this podcast, I'll try to right some wrongs and take on a new topic each episode that I think I knew, but in fact, I just don't know. This episode is all about getting your body moving, getting motivated, finding a routine, and working towards a healthy body and lifestyle. I'm talking about running. This episode is inspired by my recent PB at a park run. I went on my own for the first time, and it's my second ever park run. And if you had told me about 2.5 years ago that I would do that, I would have laughed in your face almost. Because I can't believe I went there and I got caught up going at a good pace, and I got a solid 24 minutes, and I'm absolutely chuffed. So I thought, using that energy, I've tried to put together some information and some key facts and some interesting tips about running for this episode to try and disprove some of my old assumptions that I used to have about running, and also some assumptions that I might have now. So let's see how this goes, and I hope you enjoy. First assumption for this podcast episode is that running is really difficult to get into, and it's boring, and it's really difficult for some people who have certain habits to really find the enjoyment out of running. So I definitely would say I was like this for a long time, up until probably the last few years, and we're going to look at some interesting articles and some tips and tricks of how to get into running to try and disprove that assumption that I used to have, that running was just really difficult to get into and it wasn't very nice, and it really is awful when you first start. And I think actually in reality it's got a bit of an unfair reputation, and that I gave it an unfair reputation, and I wasn't really a fan of getting into running. So I think it's just how you start running is more important. It's than anything else. I remember I used to run about maybe 2 miles at most, but maybe maximum 20 minutes, and I was like, and my legs would seize up, my shins would seize up mostly, and it was painful. Wasn't really enjoyable, let alone the cardio. It was awful, absolutely awful, and I completely relate to anyone who says starting running was rubbish, and I completely agreed with them at the time. But I want to challenge that. I want to see how there are actually ways of approaching running that I made the mistakes back in the day, and it's now that I run at least once a week, maybe twice, I think ideally 3 times when we were mostly working from home all week, but now it's a little bit less. How have I got to that point, or maybe I've made the right decisions by accident? Maybe I got some good advice. Maybe I got some good inspiration as well. So I really want to sort of challenge that assumption of mine. So let's see how that goes. So I wanted to kick this off with some article and some information from Runner's World that made it sort of very, very clear how they look at this. And they firstly admit that getting into running isn't easy. So there's an element there that they are admitting to. But they quoted an interesting coach here. She's called Janet Hamilton of a coaching club in the US, and she says some really, really cool things actually. She says, you have to start where you are, not where you think you should be. And if you go further or faster than you're ready for, your body can't adapt quickly enough and you'll get injured. And I completely agree with that, but I think it's easy to forget that sometimes when you do start running and you sort of feels okay and you just keep going. You just keep going as hard as you can, or you feel like you can get quicker, and then after it, or the few days after it, you feel awful. And it's really hard to take that time to go slowly and build that up. So I can see how that is such an easy mistake to make, but it is so true. If you push yourself too much too soon, it does really push you back 2 or 3 spaces, so I can get it. But people's ego or motivation, it just takes over, and they really push it. And I think I made that mistake for many years when I did try and get into running. So the next one I wanted to look at on this article from Runner's World is a sort of quoted here from Charles Duhigg. He's an author of a book called The Power of Habit, which looks really fascinating, and I love the way he phrases some things. The first thing he sort of covers, which I really like, is that you need to find a few key things to get really into the groove. And the first tip of starting how to run is just get that motivation. Where are you finding that motivation from? And how he breaks it down, I really like. So he says you need to first find your cues. What makes you think, okay, maybe I should go for a run? What makes you think I need to exercise? What makes you want to feel like you're running or you do normally? So the first one is time. It could be a place. It could be a certain music. So, or it could be sort of other people that you normally run with, a running partner of sorts. So that's the first thing. Then the second thing is the reward. What are you rewarding yourself and you're associating the exercise with? So it could be sort of chocolate, or you get a sports massage of sorts, or you treat yourself to a smoothie or a nice coffee. And then lastly, it's the routine. Doing the workout and doing it at a certain time of the day, and trying to do that at the same time. And this next part I really agree with, and that is keeping it regular. So trying to run at the same time of the day, I really like doing that. I don't know about you guys, but getting that, my favorite time is just before sort of 12 o'clock, just before lunch. You've managed to wake yourself up, your body's a bit awake there. You can go for a nice run, you come back, and you can treat yourself to lunch. So that's so good. But he says how when you sort of repeat that sort of routine, the cues, and when the cues are consistent, you create neural pathways that make it into a habit. So that makes sense. And I think one thing I do here as well is I have the same running playlist, and that sort of reminds me, and I add to it occasionally, but I think it is really good that you get that sort of trigger to say, okay, I know what I'm doing. My body knows what it's doing. But he does sort of mention in a key area here that you do need to treat yourself, and I like that. You do have to treat yourself a little bit, and so I think that's a really important one. But just don't treat yourself too much. One run is, well, I think I'll touch on this later, but I think you burn around 100 calories per mile. So you got to run quite a few miles if you go and treat yourself to a big chocolate cake after. So yeah. So the next one is just getting yourself moving. So walk more, and this is just getting your body used to the strains of a sort of a moving your body around in that endurance. And it's a pretty basic one, and that's a good point. I think I tried this one in the past. I did a lot of walking to school, walking to work, and your body just gets a bit stronger. The soles of your feet get a bit stronger. So I agree with this one. Just getting moving is so important. And the professor of exercise science at the University of South Carolina, he says he's called Stephen Blair. He says it's not a race walk, but not a window shopping walk either. When you try to start walking, try to adopt a brisk walk. So it's that is the basis of all exercise. And he outlines how the best exercise is the one you will do consistently. So I quite like that one there. The next area is the goal is just to start running, get moving, and get that. Try that running and stick to a plan if you can. But do a bit of running, do a bit of walking. Then the next goal, from the fourth goal, is to run non-stop. So this one I always try to do, and I thought some people say you shouldn't. You should take breaks. Sometimes you are forced to take breaks. So I think actually running non-stop is quite a good goal for most people. And when I see people like run for a kilometer and then stop and then run a kilometer, I actually criticize that. But in reality, that's just a stepping stone towards the next phase of running non-stop. So I shouldn't really be critical, or not critical necessarily, but in my head I think that's bad. But actually they're doing the right thing, because that is a step towards being better at running or having a better routine. So fair play to them. on that one. And then the fifth goal is try to run for longer. So this is something I've sort of explored recently in the last few years, of going from running a 5k, which I can't believe I do so regularly, and then running a 10k. So I did the first one last year, I remember, in lockdown, up north in Cumbria, and it was hot and tough. And then we did another one where it was even hotter, but it was really nice along the beach. And but then now we can do it quite regularly. There's a great route that I do round from Vauxhall all the way along past the London Eye, back down from Southwark. And I think 10k is a nice one. It can just be a bit long if you haven't got the time. Generally it takes about an hour, maybe just under. I think my record is just over 55 minutes. I'm pretty chuffed with that. But how do you actually build up to that? So that is the fifth step that they say here in this runner's world, to get better at running. Then it's to get faster. So being more aware of your pace. So Strava is really good for this one. But this is coming from Runner's World, so it's a little bit biased in that sense, that it's a little... Well, the person writing it or suggesting it knows running very well. So I wanted to contrast that with a slightly different article. This is from... so I found one called How to Become a Runner Even If You Think You Hate Running. First from the Cosmopolitan, the Cosmo, from 2015. It's quite a different point of view that really looks at sort of more of the basic challenges of getting into running. But they're pretty scathing towards non-runners, though. And so how they've actually outlined is quite good. It says, non-runners tend to share one distinct talent. They're brilliant at making excuses, but unless you're legitimately injured, there's no good reason to write off one of the simplest physical activities, regardless of your current fitness level. It continues saying, even if you're all like, I get it, I walk, know that running and walking are fairly different, or they are very different. Running is an impact sport, which means it sends shocks up your body that activates your muscles and ligaments and tendons and promotes bone density, says Elizabeth Corkham, a New York-based running coach. So a bit of an interesting source there, but it is true. Running is a superior cardio workout. So for anyone who refuses to go running, but they say they do lots of walks, it's just not the same. So I sort of thought that as well, but I never sort of disagreed with someone who just said they walk a lot. But it's pretty clear when people say I walk a lot, they definitely are. They definitely aren't as fit as someone who runs a lot, and that is just the fact. So let's continue into this article. It's quite interesting. So the first thing it outlines is, how should you run? Everyone, when you start running, definitely one of my assumptions of starting to getting into running is, I'm running wrong. Why is it hurting my leg? Why are things sort of not quite sort of feeling good every time? Is it because of my technique? And actually, it's been proven in there's evidence in 2017 from the International Journal of Exercise Science that the best way to run is actually to follow your instincts, and the natural way of running will actually get you sort of going better. Your body will adapt better, and actually that is the way to go. So if you're always being told, go to the shop, pay lots of money for fancy shoes, and be told how to run and film yourself, actually it's well known across the sporting world that you should actually just follow your instincts and just go for it. And once you become a more professional level, perhaps there's ways of changing your technique. But if you're an early runner, just go for it. I'm thinking of almost Phoebe from Friends, where she just goes a bit crazy. Maybe not quite as mad as that, but running naturally is the best way, and trying to have a relaxed posture, and that is where you're going to get the best results. So the sort of 8 areas that this Cosmo article outlines to approach running, even if you hate it, is the first one is that you don't need to get new shoes. I agree with that. You don't need to get new shoes straight away, so that's absolutely understandable. But I could argue that getting some proper running shoes, some articles have said that you should do that, and I got some Hoka 1s. They're excellent. As soon as I got them, there was like running on cushions. It was fantastic. So I would, once you have started running a bit, treat yourself to some good pair of shoes, because it is worth it. So that one I sort of disagree with, but I get it. It does. That's a price tag to starting a sport, but it's no different from other sport, you could argue. Second one is start slow. I agree with that. That's exactly right. Then it's try to run outdoors. It's so much better. Don't have to carb load just because you're running to try and that makes you feel better. Fifth one, don't try not to run when you're hungry or you're completely full. And that makes sense, because that is awful, that feeling, especially when you get a stitch and you're full, or you're hungry and you get a stitch and your body just seems to be collapsing on itself. I've definitely done that before. And then try to prevent the boredom. Find a running partner if you want company. Find a podcast to listen to, music to listen to. Set up a playlist. Put that effort into making it an enjoyable experience. And that's exactly what I do. When depends on what I'm feeling. If I want to get pumped and run quick, I get some good tunes on and just go for it. Or I wanted to take it a bit slow, listen to a good podcast and just sort of get through there and listen to the conversation and sort of get lost a bit. So this one I think is really important. You need to start at the beginning and figure out how is it going to be entertaining for you, or how is it going to become a good time spent. And then the last one is make sure you stretch after. I think that's a key one that a lot of people do forget, or they do it sort of at the wrong time, or they do the wrong muscles. This one I don't really know exactly, but of what the best stretches are, but it's pretty obvious. You just need to try and warm up and warm down. And then last one is just eat and drink better. Make sure you have that sort of snack after or before. So there are things there people cannot do when they get into running, and it can send them backwards after trying to do it. But no, so it's like very similar, but an interesting article from Cosmo, just trying to really push people from being walkers to runners. It also touches on where you get your motivation from or inspiration from is actually more relevant here. So it says influencers, just because they run doesn't mean they're the best advice about running. When it comes to sport, it's important that you follow plans and sort of training programs from people who are qualified and trained and they understand the science behind it. Just because someone's good at something doesn't mean that they know the best way of doing it. Maybe they find a really good way of doing things there for them, but doesn't mean it's going to work for you. So that's an interesting bit of advice that was there, and I sort of agree with that. And I think that's really easy to fall into that trap, especially with the sort of the influencer world and social media. People actually will trust someone that they watch their stories every day and they barely know and have never spoken to, than a qualified trainer or a qualified gym that has all that sort of time and certifications that say that they know what they're doing. And I know sometimes they don't, but that's definitely something you should consider more. So my next assumption that I want to examine in a bit more detail and challenge is that running's health benefits are generally, I assumed that it would be really great for obviously your lower body, and it's good cardio, you burn some decent amount of calories, so it's good for weight loss. But often you would do a lot of running and you don't see the weight loss. And I remember when I was 4 or 5 years ago, I always thought sort of going to the gym and muscle workout was better, the afterburn, all they would go on about. And that running was, you burn it in the moment, that's great, but it's so easy to offset those calories with just the wrong food. So actually all that effort, you don't get much reward. And the benefits to your strength are that you just get slightly stronger legs, but you don't really feel it or see it that often. So actually it wasn't that great, but so therefore that's why I really didn't get into running that well when I was younger that much. So the benefits just weren't really there to see. And I'm going to break this down. I found some great information and data on this to show that I was completely wrong, and I'm going to really make myself more informed on this key issue of the health benefits of running, because they are a lot more than I realised. So let's take a look. I found a great article on a site called Podium Runner, and they broke down the benefits of running into 10 really eye-opening areas that I didn't realize that running did so much to your sort of the body. And so I'm going to go through these to really show that my assumptions back in the day and even recently, that it only sort of helped the lower body, and it was sort of the calories burnt were the ones you see on whether it's the Strava or the Fitbit that you might have, and it's sort of about the same amount as the meal, or about 100 calories a mile. That's all you get. No, it's a lot more than that. So the first one is that it adds years to your life and life to your years. So it really makes you live longer fundamentally. And I think out of all the exercising things you can do, whether that's obviously playing sport where running is obviously involved, but compare that to sort of actual sort of running regularly as well, or add that in, you can really improve your lifespan. And everyone has this obsession of living for longer, although they don't even know why and how, but that's a topic for another day. But this an article, a metadata analysis article, so one of those strange ones, said around 30% low. You have a 30% lower rate of all trauma mortality. So, and on average, a runner has 3 more years extra life. So, quite an interesting view on that. A bit of looking at data from a big point of view to try and get these numbers. But I suppose that's a pretty good benefit there. So the second benefit is that running makes you sleep better. And there are many articles about the importance of sleep. We all know about that. But it's proven, and there's a great science writer, Christy Ashwanden. I think I've got that one wrong, but never mind. She wrote a book called Good to Go, and that really outlines some key evidence that running makes you sleep more, and because you need to recover, so regular exercise improves the quality of your sleep overall. And it's actually also outlined in the Johns Hopkins American Journal of Lifestyle Exercise. Says we have a solid evidence that exercise does in fact help you fall asleep more quickly and improve sleep quality. And I agree with that. I completely agree with that. But you have to do the right amount of exercise, I think. And if you do exercise just before you sleep, that can sometimes make it a bit trickier, I think. But I'm not sure. The third benefit is that running can improve your knees and back. And this is one that really has disproven some key areas of my assumptions back in the day, is that it was bad for your knees, the sort of pounding the pavement, and bad for your back, sort of having to run regularly, and that sort of repetitive strain of just effectively repetitive lunges or jump lunges, moving your body forward when you run. But in reality, running actually helps your knee. And I actually had a bit of a knee injury from a bad squat about 4 years ago, and running has actually completely helped that knee injury, just below the sort of the kneecap. And over a period of 2 years, it's completely gone. And I used to have to wear sort of the knee brace things, like the sort of strap around your knee to try and keep it tight and protect it. And running has strengthened it to a point where it's just completely gone. And I feel very lucky that that's happened, because I was worried about that. But actually, it's really good for your knees. That's obviously different for each person. Sometimes they have sort of such bad knees that in reality you do really have to protect it, though. So no, a really interesting one there with regards to improving your knees. There was a study that compared 675 marathon runners, and in that cohort, arthritis rates of active marathon runners was below the average, and this is over in the US. So no matter what people say, they might know someone who's got a bad sort of knee from running or hurt themselves, but in reality, compared to out of shape adults or out of shape people, they have more worse knee problem and back problems. So therefore, running is good for your knee and back, technically, statistically. And there's another study that outlined here that 44 first-time marathon runners 2/3 women there, and that knees of novice runners achieved sustained improvement, and for at least 6 months post-marathon, the condition of the bone marrow and cartilage was improved. So, yeah, that really was very interesting, and he broke it down even more to a level of intervertebral disc height, so IVD, and they studied the sort of the middle-age long-term endurance runners exhibit that the more years subject of running, the better the disc spacing or the IVD disc spacing look. So the more mileage, the better your back. So scientifically proven there, or with this, definitely from that article anyway, from that point of view, that it's great for your knee and back. So that really opened my eyes a bit more there to that degree. So the fourth one is that it helps you lose weight, but also helps you keep it off. And this one is really interesting, in my opinion, because people always go about, they lose weight and then they put it back on, and they lose weight and they have these different diets, and it's put here that you can't outrun a bad diet, and that's partly true, but it's also not necessarily completely true, because it says here that you can actually track you're more likely to do better in losing weight because you are easier to track your calories when you're running. You clearly can see that you generally burn around 100 calories per mile, as I mentioned earlier, or you can figure it out by 0.75 times your body weight in pounds of how many calories you burn per mile. So you have those that have that data to work with. But there's clear data that's proven here that people do put weight on once they lose it. But there's more data here with regards to running, though, that when runners were using, I think the article here is the National Weight Control Registry, who kept track of a large group of people who lost an average of 66 pounds and kept off the weight for 5.5 years. 90% of them exercised on average an hour a day, and suggesting that people who sort of exercise regularly or consistently, they keep the weight off compared to people who don't, who perhaps will lose a significant amount of weight in 6 months, but after 18 months after that, you end up putting it back on. So there was so that's quite interesting. And then in a 2018 paper, The Effects of Exercise and Physical Activity on Weight Loss and Maintenance, the authors found that individuals exercising 200 to 300 minutes per week, which is quite a lot, I generally do just over 150, but they achieve a better weight maintenance. So it takes so that's overall, it doesn't necessarily point out running necessarily, but running is definitely one that you can exercise regularly, and it's clear how many calories you generally burn, and you do burn at a good rate. Moving your body requires a lot of effort and force, and it's definitely one of the exercises that burns the most. So yeah, a really interesting benefit there about weight loss. And I think a lot of people who struggle with their weight do lose it through dieting, and they do other exercises. I know the gyms become very popular, and that is great, but I didn't realize there was so much sort of evidence and research behind proving that just keeping it off, running is actually a key to that. And I would agree with that myself. Having sort of lost weight since actually the beginning of lockdown, getting into running has definitely helped me keep it off. I haven't sort of fluctuated like I have in the past when I used to go to the gym. So yeah, that reinforces something I didn't really know as well, with some interesting articles and experiments there, or research experiments. This next one is particularly interesting, is how running improves your immunity. And it says here, exercise scientist and 58-time marathoner David Newman, so he's a bit biased, has spent 40 years of his life studying exercise and immunity. And mostly it's good news, but effectively he released a paper with Laurel Wentz in 2019, proving or summarizing the compelling link between physical activity and the body's defense system, and that intensity levels and diet were the key indicators of improving the body's surveillance against disease, lower inflammation, enhance gut microbiome composition, reduce risk of upper respiratory infections and influenza, and also improve antibody response. So all very relevant right now in terms of the fight against the viruses and winter colds and staying healthy. But a J curve, if to describe it, is very simply put, is that if you moderately exercise, your sort of risk of bad sort of infections and illness is reduced by almost 50%. But if you do overexert yourself, it can increase your likelihood of getting badly infected with a disease of some sort, even to up to sixfold. So this is obviously the people who are perhaps having to walk very long distances if they're trying to escape countries, like refugees, and they're ill-equipped, they haven't got the right clothes, and they don't eat well, and they have to sort of burn lots of calories walking long distances or and therefore that can make them susceptible. So I completely understand this evidence, but it's a pretty interesting and simply put view how exercise is so important to the immunity, and I don't think people realize it so much. And there was definitely an assumption that I made a little bit when I met people who refused to exercise. I don't do it often as now, but maybe in the past, or maybe even looking at myself in the past when I didn't exercise as much, that I didn't realize how much it was related to people's immunity and getting sick. So I think that's something that should be sort of advertised more, because it really does stop you from getting sick. And I know that came up a lot in COVID time, in the COVID sort of media, whirlwind and tornado going around every couple of months or every couple of days back last year. But exercise is so important for the immunity, and I don't think people realize it quite so much. So let's round off the last few. So the next one is that it reduces cognitive function. So running raises heart rate, which increases blood flow. So that's oxygen-rich blood going around the body more than it normally would. That goes around the brain. That can't be bad. That can't be bad for the brain. It's difficult to necessarily prove this in sort of a clear way, but a meta-analysis again, so just a large data set, suggests prove that people who exercise regularly, who are runners, there would be that the brain health was better with those people, and it sort of outlines here how it stimulated the release of brain-derived neurotrophic factors, a BDNF, a protein that encourages growth and survival of neurons in the brain. And there's another study as well that's outlined it improves total brain volume, or grey matter, even if you didn't start running until midlife or later in life. You'd still see the benefits, and this could decrease the chances of cognitive decline, and obviously worst case scenario is Alzheimer's. So that is something that's I'm gonna remember and try and keep running even into my later years. So the last off is number 7, reduce the risk of cancers. So that's a whole difficult one here, but they did do a study, the Journal of the American Medical Association, with 1.44 million Americans and European adults, and they concluded that out of all that someone who is, when they exercise, regardless of their smoking or lower body weight, they were a lot less likely to sort of develop cancer compared to those who didn't exercise. That's pretty bleak, but it's pretty true. And it's also, and it outlines here, it's also very helpful if you unfortunately do develop cancer. Running can help a lot. Number 8, this one's a really big one. It improves mental health and reduces depression. And depression, as everyone knows, is wideswept and very hard to understand, different in every person. But I completely agree with this one. And I think back before depression was better understood, people didn't realize the benefit of running in particular. I don't think that necessarily the gym does the same thing and that's just again an assumption, but I think that regular repetitive running, it's clear that from this review, and it's difficult to prove this, it says it's really nicely put here, is that why do you run? That question, why do you run? And the answer for many people, they say it's because it makes me feel better, and I would agree with that. So because it sort of brings down or resets your emotions, your mood, your mental energy, and it reduces the chance of having a blue day. And I definitely do this when you're having a bit of a rubbish day. A run can really just completely change that day, and so I would recommend that without a doubt. And it's proven in again another large meta-analysis in 2016, that exercise is an effective treatment for depression. Exercise is effective as a psychotherapy and prescription, as effective as psychotherapy and prescription meds, and it could serve as an alternative to medical treatment. So this is obviously in the US point of view, but I think I could not agree with that more. And in the 2019 Handbook for Sport, Exercise and Psychology, the American Psychology Association states there is substantial evidence supporting exercise use in the treatment of mental disorders, especially depression. So that is I think it's pretty clear, but I think this was really important for me. In the lockdowns, running helped a lot, and I think it's helped a lot of other people. There was sort of a lovely person. She came to sort of virtually speak to my work a couple of months back, maybe about 6-7 months ago, and she set up something called Run Talk Run, I believe, and she sort of was having a very difficult time with depression and sort of mental health, and she had to leave her job and she didn't know necessarily what to do, but she started running, found how it just helped her so much, and therefore she started then inviting other people who perhaps were struggling, and she posted on the social media and wider, and created this brand of Run Talk Run, and it's important to talk. Anyone's invited, they meet, and I think it just grew from there. And I think there's Run Talk Run sessions in many cities around the UK, and also now I think in the US with some of her friends setting it up, and it's become a bit of a great success story out of a difficult time for some individuals. So I really like that one, and do check it out on Instagram, Run Talk Run. If you do need someone to run with, or you're looking for a different group of people who are very friendly and understanding, I think that is a fantastic setup that they've done there, and good for her. And the last few benefits of running in particular, and this is where running compared to other exercises sort of really stands out, and I didn't realize this, was that running improves glucose regulation and massively lowers the risk of diabetes and pre-diabetes if you do already have type 1 diabetes. So I think that's something that not many people know about or deal with, or try to use as a way of managing diabetes. But I think I didn't realize how much it helped. The American Diabetes Association has clearly outlined that it massively helps prevent type 2 diabetes, as well as, which is typically caused by a poor lifestyle. But I think running actually really massively reduces that. And there was a recent report that in 2019 that followed 19,000 adults for more than 6 years. This is a big report that compared rates of diabetes in runners versus non-runners. The result was that runners had a 72% lower rate of diabetes development. That's a massive percentage difference there. And so yeah. And then the last one here is running lowers your blood pressure, and it says here in the Global Burden of Disease published results, it outlined out of all the 388 risks to people's health, high blood pressure was up there as one of the worst. And running is proven, it outlines here from another analysis, that it massively lowers blood pressure. And out of 391 randomized controlled trials, it's caused a modest and consistent reduction of SBP, and so I believe that's That's got systolic blood pressure, and but it also has a significant reduction on both systolic blood pressure, but also diastolic blood pressure. So it seems to be double whammy. I'm not exactly sure how that is related to sort of hypertension and high blood pressure, but it's pretty. There's some good evidence there that it's massive on the blood pressure, and I know people who suffer from high blood pressure naturally from sort of difficult genetics and so whether that will have the same impact, it's really difficult to know. And I know the blood pressure issue in the US with people taking drugs a lot, so I'm not sure how that's related and whether that'll have an impact. So it's difficult to know, really. And then there is an actually additional benefit here that I wanted to outline that they've nicely put, is that overall running builds your self-esteem. And I could not agree more, and I think this really is something that I didn't realise, and this article and reading around it and running for the last 19 months or so has really shown that I didn't realise how important running can be to people in building their self-esteem and building their confidence in themselves, whether it's the way they sort of look or their body works or their body moves, but actually just having that time to just de-stress and do something that's so good for you. And while many people think it's boring and there are difficult things to, when you start running, it does get better and the upside is so high. It's crazy that not more people do it, and that there is a bit of a stigma behind it, and I think that's where I think people do need to understand the true benefits of running. And this is probably one of the ultimate benefits that people are always struggling with. And you can and running is so simple, you can literally fall back on it when you need to, when you might get taken a knock, or your mind is a bit frustrated, it doesn't really know what to do, or you're being challenged, your self-beliefs are being challenged. It is so good for your self-esteem. So I really like that one, and that's probably what I'm going to finish on. It's clear that the running is just so good for you, and I could not encourage it more to other people. So to summarize, my first assumption that getting into running was difficult and it's hard, and I can understand why people didn't want to do it, and I thought it was just not going to really be sort of any fun, and I was always trying to go too fast. Well, it's pretty clear that there is definitely some set things you can do. Take it slow, build yourself up, only go to what you can do, and don't go too far too soon. Try and do the right thing, look after yourself, try and make it regular, build the habit, follow the cues that was outlined that I mentioned earlier with time, and trying to doing it a similar period each week, and try and listen to the same sort of music, and find that way of rewarding yourself, creating that routine. If you follow those steps, getting into running is actually a lot easier than what I thought. So that's really interesting. The second assumption of the health benefits of running, I always knew it was going to be good for the lower body, and you obviously burn sort of your calories. And I think a lot of people always assume running with weight loss. In reality, weight loss is just one out of many, many benefits of running. And I outlined there 10 really big sort of important aspects and benefits of running, from your immunity to your reduced rate of diabetes, to blood pressure, to sort of your knees and back, that really sort of opened my eyes. I didn't realize, and I've managed to see the benefits personally on that one. But then I want to go back to what I finished it on. It really helps with people's self-esteem, and this self-esteem is one of the biggest challenges of not just young people in the world, but everyone. I think everyone struggles with this nowadays, especially with how much we're connected and seeing what everyone's doing. So that is just a benefit that you can't necessarily measure, but it's something that is so important to everyone. So there, some really interesting facts and data and quotes there that have really opened my eyes to a few assumptions and views that I've had about running. And I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you found it a bit interesting. And I've tried something a bit different for this episode. And I look forward to doing the next one. Thanks, everybody.